but I'm going to go ahead and just get us started. So good afternoon, everyone. Thank you all for being here today. I will be recording the meeting for those who weren't able to join us. So now is the time to turn on your video and let us see all your beautiful selves if that's what you want to do. If you're in the middle of a snack or something else, that works as well. We're just happy to have you here. And we're going to get our meeting started with a land acknowledgement. We would like to open this convening by recognizing that we are on the unceded ancestral land of the Coast Salish peoples, the traditional home of all tribes and bands within the Duwamish, Suquamish, Tulalip, and Muckleshoot nations. We cannot work to fulfill our mission and our vision of an anti-racist present if we don't first acknowledge and recognize the true history and the cost of colonization. However, acknowledgement is only a first step. We urge you to engage in accountable relationships and informed action. So first, just a few announcements. As a network, we look to uplift all the voices and activities that further our shared priority to increase Black homeownership. So please be sure to send me any updates or info for the policy digest that comes out each week, anything that's for the good of the group. And if you're not yet signed up for that weekly digest, please do so and feel free to invite others. We really want to continue to grow this network and our impact. And then lastly, please save the date. We will be having our virtual BHI Policy Summit on Wednesday, December 18th from 2 to 3:30 p.m. I'm in the process of creating that agenda for the meeting, and I'll announce the agenda when it's finalized. In the meantime, I'm going to be sending out an Outlook invitation to keep the event on your radar. This is going to be our third policy summit. So this is going into our third year of this effort, and we'll use the opportunity to delve into deeper conversations about the policy actions that are going to be in our 2025 Homeownership Policy Framework. And, if you have suggestions for that summit, for guests, for content, please do reach out to me. So today we're going to take a little time just at the beginning of our meeting here to get to know one another. I'll be asking for volunteers to share their homeownership story with us. And, I know many of us spend many hours a day in Zoom meetings where it's just kind of one business topic after another. So I was hoping that we could work together to create a little space for our humanity today. And I hope that some of you will plan to share. And I'm going to go ahead and we'll get started with that after I'm going to preview the rest of the agenda. So I am today, after we've had that connection time, going to be presenting a draft list of the policy actions that we're considering for inclusion in our 2025 Homeownership Policy Framework. So we're going to discuss whether we're getting to a right-sized list, if the list is feeling reflective of the effort we want to make in 2025. And I'm hoping this will very much be a discussion. We're then going to have Jesse Simpson, the HDC Director of Government Relations and Policy, spend some time informing us about the city, county, and state revenue landscapes, so we'll all have a better understanding of how 2025 might be shaping up, at least on the revenue front. And then lastly, of course, we will hear from you. So if there's a shouldn't be missed advocacy opportunity or a community event coming up, please do share that with the group. And at 3:30, the meeting will conclude. You'll move out into that world of September weather with all the clouds that you could ever want. And even though, I've been in Seattle for over 3 decades now, I seem to always get sideswiped by September. So I'm coping, I'm trying, but it's not an easy transition for me. So without further ado, let's take some time to connect. We won't have time for everyone to contribute. So, we're going to do what we can to give a piece of our story and let others share. And we'll do with what we have. I'm looking for people who are willing to just kind of introduce themselves, share a part of their homeownership story with us. And it'd be great if we could learn a little bit about how homeownership has directly affected your life. So I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing my screen now. so we can see each other a little better. Do we have a volunteer who might feel like sharing today? Oh, it's a long pause, but I know I'm going to
I
find
can
one.
agree to share. I
Thanks.
got to leave early anyway, I'll agree to share. So you
Thanks,
want,
George.
um, yeah, I've been a homeowner, well, most of my life, and I started when I was about 20 years old. My father helped me buy what amounted to a FHA repossessed house or something, but it had been fixed up. And so my father gave me $500 for a little down payment, and that's when I started. And so from there, obviously, I then leveraged that. Well, I didn't even leverage that. I just turned it into a rental, and then I went and bought another house outside of Seattle and stayed there 11 and a half years, and then built a house in Seattle in the Mount Baker neighborhood. And so that's been my journey. I'm in a manufactured home now. They're more less expensive, but the land rent is very high. So that's my experience now, having to deal with something like that. So is that kind of what you're looking forward to?
You bet.
Okay,
Absolutely. Thank you so much for sharing,
thank
George.
you. Okay.
Ethan, were you kind of unmuting there? You want to do a little share?
Yeah, sure. I was just going to break the silence. My name is Ethan Robinson. I'm the advocacy organizer at Habitat Seattle King County. Um, I grew up in a home that my parents owned, and from there, sort of faced a lot of housing instability. I was homeless when I was 15, and now as a young professional in the growing Seattle area, struggling to enter the market. So, come at this work from a lot of different angles, a lot of different lived experience. And as the organizer, get to meet a lot more people who have similar and adjacent experiences. So, I'm happy to be in this space, and thanks, Bambi.
Thanks so much for sharing. Hello, Ms. Ruby.
Hi, how you doing?
I am well. We are wondering if people are interested in sharing how homeownership has directly affected their lives. Are you hoping to share today, or were you just popping into the meeting here?
Well, I'm popping in, but I will share briefly. I my mom bought this home in 1963. And after I graduated and got out of college, I moved to Atlanta for 30 years. Came back to Seattle around 2016. To the family home. My sister had got dementia, so I needed to help her out. And I was able to get a home because I had a home. We had a home, and she bought it when they were affordable. And, I didn't know when I moved back to Seattle that housing was so horrible, just horrible. And, nobody could find a affordable place to rent or to, buy. That was out of the question then. So, I'm hoping now that a couple of new home ownership programs are cropping up in Seattle. And I'm really hoping that could turn the tide, because there's been a lot of millionaires, billionaires, and centimillionaires. The Times says that's been recruited to our city. And so, they're making everything unaffordable pretty much for the people that already live here, the, people that's been living here for decades. So, hoping that something happened to kind of level things off a little bit for everybody.
Well, thank you so much for sharing some of your story, Ms. Ruby. And we'll see if there's anyone else here who might be willing to share today.
I can share. I'm not on screen today, but I'm Angela Rosman with Natural and Built Environments, and my husband and I got married young, and he was in the military, so we were able to buy a home with a VA loan with zero down after we lived in a house his family owned and did a whole bunch of like studs up remodeling in exchange for utilities only rent for a year. And so between money that we received from our wedding and not needing to pay rent for a year, we were able to even pay the fees and costs to buy a home with zero down, and then lived with roommates for over a decade to reduce our housing costs, but would not be able to buy today.
Thanks for sharing, Angela. We still have some time to connect here, so anyone else thinking about sharing a little bit of their homeownership story, how homeownership may have directly affected their life, whether it be your personal story of your own, acquiring or being a part of, or just, how it's impacting your journey as you move forward, even professionally. Peter, do I see you stepping in here?
Well, I'm trying to reflect on it. Comparatively, I've lived a life of privilege, and so have not had these adversities. But I do remember my first house, and I wish I had it back at $60,000 in the university district. It was, 4 bedrooms and allowed me to be close to UW and go to graduate school. And then, just the continuous trading of that small amount of equity has created stability for me throughout my life. But that's the cool thing about this whole group is we're talking about ownership, which actually means equity, which means security, which means growth in that equity. So we we don't want to deprive people of the future growth of their equity, but we finding ways to get on that train is an exciting opportunity. But it's such a different conversation when you're talking about ownership versus renting, and we need both. There's no question about it. But I'm over the last talk more and more about building equity through ownership, and that's really the path that solves a lot of problems.
Thanks so much for sharing, Peter.
Uh-oh.
Anita, are you thinking you might want to share with us today?
Sure. Peter inspired me. Can you hear me? Okay. What he talked about is, us being here for ownership, as a member of a different BHI committee, sustaining existing homeowners. I, like Miss Ruby, am very passionate about really the anti-displacement work that also is happening because for years, many of us worked against the idea that we should all come back as renters and then potentially as homeowners after, coming back to the community through programs like community preference. So for me, my homeownership journey started very young. Also, I married my high school sweetheart and we bought this house at age 23. And I used to walk by this house. I used to feed the lady that lived in this house before me, Meals on Wheels, and I got paid a quarter to do that. Before even her, one of the Black leaders in the community that has a strong legacy of support lived in this house. So this house has just always been in my life. And now I'm trying to build 2 townhomes or dadus in the backyard so that my own children won't be guaranteed displacement and my grandchildren won't be guaranteed displacement. Because if I were to pass away today, my adult children would not be able to afford my house because of the equity, Peter, that I've leveraged in my house to live and to stay. I just recently got a mortgage notice that I was $970 short on my escrow because of new taxes. So now my mortgage has gone up by $200 a month just in the last round of this half of the year's taxes in August. So I am feeling the burn and the bleed, and I am here for anything that helps sustain the remnant of, where we were once 70% of the Seattle population's homeowners. We're now well, actually, let me back up that, not the homeowners specifically, but where we were 70% in my zip code specifically, we were 70%, and we're now down to about 14% in my particular zip code. we are working really hard you'll see the Black Legacy homeowner signs all around my block. If you walk my block, you'll see 15 or 16 of them just on one block, because the advocacy has been in my area to keep us here. So part of my homeownership journey is making sure my children won't be displaced from this area. And so, yes, I'm very interested in policies that will help that.
Thank you so much for sharing, Anita. We probably have time for one other person to share today. Again, we're just trying to understand a little bit more about each other and why we're here today, and maybe how home ownership has directly affected your life. We've heard from a number of people, and we're going kind of across the spectrum of different experiences, but there's some common themes. It's really just great to connect. All right, Amanda, can you close us out on this conversation?
Yeah, thanks. Hi, everybody. I'm Amanda DeShazo. I'm the Executive Director of the Affordable Housing Consortium in Tacoma, Pierce County. Yeah, my story is weird. I grew up on the east side of Tacoma, living with a single mom. And when it came time for me to purchase my first home, I moonlit and started a consulting company and was working full time and going to school. When I looked for houses in my area in East Side, because I wanted to live close to my mom and just be where I grew up, but I couldn't actually afford anything. And I found a house on Hilltop and that I really loved, and was able to work with the homeowner. I wrote them a letter letting them know like how much I loved their house and how difficult it had been to find somewhere. And they actually like worked with me and took our offer, even though it wasn't the highest, so that, you know, I could buy my first home here. I went on to get married and had a kid, and we ended up moving down the street, but I love this house so much. I ended up renting it out, and I wanted it to give to my daughter someday. Well, having then gone through a divorce and split, I was really thankful that I ended up having the house because I was able to move back into my house. If I hadn't, I'd probably have to end up renting, and the cost of rent is so much more than the mortgage of my first house. So just feeling actually really appreciative. All this is really new. So having a place for my daughter, being able to keep the house that I loved, and like being in community has been really great. So yeah, feeling super appreciative, and thanks to everybody else for sharing their stories as well.
Thanks so much for sharing, Amanda. And as I said, kind of at the beginning of this little section, you know, we all sit in these Zoom meetings all day long, but we don't really get a chance to connect. And it's not always possible for us to be in person together. It's complicated. So I really appreciate so much your opportunity to sit together today and just, you know, feel kind of that more human side of what we do and why we're here, and really excited to have you all here today. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen again. Thank you so much for sharing your stories. You know, it's always good to center ourselves in what this work is truly about, which is connection. And we want to just go ahead and we'll move forward, turn our attention to the Homeownership Policy Framework and where we are in the process for that. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen again. And we'll get started. And again, you know, I hope this will be a bit of a discussion. So definitely lean in. So as you all know, we co-create this framework through these policy group meetings. And we hear from policy champions and analysts, and, you know, we ask for input during the meetings. We also ask for you to, of course, always connect offline. And I just want to thank you all for being here to do that work of shaping this framework that we all advocate for. I know you have a lot of different demands on your time, and I truly do appreciate all of your efforts in this group. There are many great policies out there that could change people's lives in a very meaningful way. But this group here is focused on our shared priority to make it possible for 1,500 new low to moderate income Black households to own a home in South Seattle, South King County, and North Pierce. We ask ourselves if a policy action will most effectively increase Black homeownership, and then we kind of go from there. And the policy actions we select have policy champions. They're moving them along the policy pathway to passage. We leverage our impact to move those policies along the pathway. And right now, champions are having conversations. They're making political calculations. They're determining if 2025 is the year for them to introduce a policy. So do please keep in mind that as we kind of go through this preview of the list, there may be new additions as time goes on, and you may not see a policy item you know about or that you're interested in when I go through kind of where I think our list is at the moment. And so I invite you to chime in and provide your view and ensure that, that gets out on the radar. So my hope is we can have an interactive discussion around each of the 4 areas of emphasis rather than just kind of a download from me. And with those caveats in mind, we'll just play it by ear and we'll get to the preview. So our first area, we have 4 areas on our framework, and the first area is cost reduction. So this area is focusing on our policies that address cost impediments to homeownership opportunities. And I'm going to go ahead and just kind of run down the list with a little bit of explanation. And then again, I really appreciate your participation in discussing these actions or ones that you know of that may not be on the list. And just know, when you're running your PowerPoint and you're having a group of people in the space, it's a little difficult to kind of see all the hands and such. So I'll ask that you just take the initiative to go ahead and come off mic when you're ready to contribute, and just, be courteous to others who are trying to get their voice in as well. So the first thing that we have on this list is the construction sales tax exemption, HB 2219. So this is a bill to exempt nonprofit affordable homeownership developments from sales tax on the construction materials. And we heard about this from Habitat in July. It is going to be coming back in 2025. The bill was first introduced last year. We have the Covenant Homeownership Act trailer bill. So down payment and closing cost assistance is provided under the Covenant Homeownership Program. This bill, as a trailer bill, is going to address the recommendations that were made in the study that was the backbone of the program. So the study recommended that the program could be more effective if there was an expansion of the eligible area median income levels, if there might be a loan forgiveness exploration, if some portion of the DPA could maybe reuse, if there's a recipient who needed to move from their home but had the assistance. And the study also recommended further study to figure out who else should be eligible for assistance from the program, as the first study was comprehensive, but it wasn't exhaustive. So it doesn't cover all of the possible options. So this trailer bill is in the works, and it may address all or some of these recommendations. And again, reach out. The third one here we have is a scalable starter home production plan. So the CHA bill was passed in 25, and in 24, we went back to the legislature for a budget proviso because we wanted to address the supply side. So the budget proviso provided $500,000 for a comprehensive roadmap to scale the production of affordable starter homes, looking at efficiency and cost effectiveness. And so this roadmap will be provided to the legislature in June of 25. So it's not going to be available during the legislative session, but there may be bills that are coming from ideas in that work. And so we'll see how that goes. And then last on this list here in this section is homeowner property tax relief, SB 6249. So this bill provided state property tax relief for modest homes. It was introduced for the first time last year in 2024. I am not sure if this is going to be going forward in 25. Sometimes Assessor Wilson is here with us in the room. If he's here today, maybe he can chime in. If not, I'll certainly be connecting with him off screen so that we can find out where this may be. And so, as I said, things are kind of in process. The fall is a very busy time for policy as people start to let go of that summer and start stepping into what's going to be getting ready for the next year. So now I'm just going to open it up to all of you. How are you feeling about these actions on the list? What can you share to help inform the list of actions that just they're not here right now, but tip of your tongue. Ms. Ruby, did you want to unmute there?
Well, I just want to say that the property tax relief is very, very important. Also, well, it's not on there, but something for homeowner retention, because these homes, even brand new homes, if they're made of wood, they're going to break down pretty quick. And if somebody with a mortgage and a tax bill may not be able to afford homeowner repairs. And the Covenant Homeownership Act, that's just something that's not finished yet, but I'd be interested in seeing how the trailer bill applies to that. And that's about all. The construction sales tax exemption, I imagine that would make it cheaper for contractors, and hopefully that'll trickle down to people that want homes. But the main thing, that list is pretty much all for new homeowners, and I just never see anything for homeowner retention. So that's probably my biggest point.
Yeah. And, as part of BHI, as you said, we have the Sustaining Existing Homeowners group. And what we've done as the policy group is, as we go through some of the future slides here, there is actually something specific to sustaining existing homeowners, but we're not putting it in a cost reduction bucket. So we will see something in these slides. But, again, this is only our third time that we've created a framework, and we definitely should have those conversations about how do we stay focused, and yet how do we expand as well, right? Because if you are losing homeowners, you're definitely not increasing them, but again, they aren't new. And so with that first priority about the new homeowners, a lot of what we did in the first year and the second year was really focused on that, even though there is a Sustaining Existing Homeowners group in BHI. So it was great to have you all come and talk to this group and talk about those things that are rising to a policy action. And there is actually something at City of Seattle that seems really promising. So we're going to get to that. This is in a couple more slides. Anyone else have anything they'd like to add in here?
I just had a question. I had two clarifying questions on the construction sales tax exemption. I was wondering if, like field order 15 is happening with Homesite to help small Black developers or BIPOC developers. Is it possible that the sales tax exemption could potentially work for small, minority developers and that are developing affordable housing on their own property? And then the second thing is on the homeowner property tax relief. I know that we are going to be losing Assessor Wilson, and I wasn't sure if there were any action committees working on the new assessor and assuring that our needs are met through that. But then the onerous applications to get the relief and the underfunding of it because of the onerous applications, were any of those things discussed, or can they be discussed as this legislation moves forward?
Yeah, so a couple things there. I think something I don't. I haven't connected with Assessor Wilson recently, but I'm not sure if there is a new assessor. He's still in office.
Well, no, I'm not saying that he's gone yet, but I thought I was told that there is an upcoming election and that he was not running again.
Well, I think his election was last year, and he did win that election, so he has a term to serve out. So he's not in an election process right now. In terms of the property tax relief,
because
unless I'm wrong, that's what I think, though.
There's a group of people that believe this is the case. So I need to correct it with the people that I'm talking to.
Well, I will check my facts and we'll connect. But that's my understanding. The homeowner property tax relief bill is actually a brand new bill. So it is distinct from the current existing tax relief for seniors that you were talking about, that's having issues with making sure it has good implementation numbers. And so the tax relief bill was introduced last year. It was brand new, and it was only to reduce the state portion of your property tax if you had kind of a modest cost home. And the idea was that people with higher cost homes would kind of balance out the difference for the tax. It didn't go very far in the legislative process. And so I'm just wondering if it's going to get revamped or if it's going to be reintroduced as it was before. And I'll definitely be sure to get some more of that information. Ms. Ruby, you have your hand up? Oh, and you have yourself muted. Oh, still can't hear you right now. No worries. We'll just wait for you to unmute.
Nita, I just wanted to say that is not the case. He definitely ran last year because I was putting a lot of posts on Facebook for him, so I'm well aware of it. I haven't heard that he's going anyplace, so go ahead and get that straightened out with your people. You know, if John Wilson left, it would be hard to replace him for what he's done for us. So hopefully he'll be around for a long time.
Thank you, Ms. Ruby. All right, I'm going to go ahead and move us on to our next category. So another bucket that we look at is land acquisition and value capture. So we're focusing here on land acquisition and assemblage to preserve the affordability and to stave off displacement. And right now, a couple of things that are on the radar. We have the Skyway Homeownership and Green Space. This is a project in Skyway with permanently affordable homeownership and urban farming and wetlands development on land from a King County transfer. And then again, as I mentioned before, that scalable starter home production plan. So that's that same plan mentioned in the cost reduction conversation. It's funded by the 2024 CHA budget proviso. And this is another aspect of the plan. It is to identify and secure underutilized or available land opportunities and other land use strategies for starter homes. So this plan, again, it's providing information to the legislature. It won't be there till June of 25. So we won't know how it may impact the legislative session or if there may be any bills that kind of spin out of those conversations. So, you know, that's what I have on my current radar for land acquisition and value capture. So how are we feeling? Yeah, Peter?
Who's working on the starter home plan? Where is that coming from?
So that was an RFP from the Washington Housing Finance Commission. Applicants put in their application just a week or so ago. And so we don't yet know who's going to be moving forward with that plan.
You mean put in applications to do a starter home or develop the plan?
To develop the plan. Yeah. So it was an RFP for the $500,000 to create the roadmap. Okay. And the roadmap had to deal with acquisition, and it also had to deal with basically, you know, making sure we were reducing costs and creating starter home production. But there hasn't yet been a formal announcement of who has that proposal. And so once we know that, we'll have a much better idea of maybe what that's like. But in the moment, we are like cutting edge right here.
Ahead of the moment.
Ryan, I see your hand up.
I think Miss Ruby had her hand up before I did, though.
Oh, Ms. Ruby, and we'll just ask you to unmute there.
Thanks, Ryan. I just wanted to say, you know, regarding land acquisition and value capture, sometimes no matter how much money you have, you just can't make land that isn't available. You know, we have a lot of water and I mean, it's doubtful, but you know, there's been a lot of conversations in the group, some of the groups I do housing work with, that you know, all these skinny townhouses that are being built are not for families. They're not good, you know, no yards, stairs. Kids, just can't navigate them. They're not good for aging in place, or if you have a disability and a wheelchair. So there's been a lot of talk about keeping our housing stock that we have. There is HB 1110 does allow you to keep your single family home, or you could actually convert it, and still, even if you converted it to a duplex or triplex, you'd still have your yard and your trees that we think are good for mental health, and you still have that livable space that people could possibly get around in better than on these real skinny, tall, thin townhomes that they've been building. So with that in mind, we're also, there's been a lot of conversation, mainly with me and other people. I think I've mentioned it to you about, us be building ADUs on our property, because if the lot splitting bill does happen, there's going to be a lot of people that want to do it just because people need cash, whatever. And so, I was thinking that one way to provide land for the Covenant Homeownership Program, or any homeownership program that is truly going to be affordable housing, for people, or new homes or whatever, is an idea that, people that want to split their lots could do so and partner with the Covenant Homeownership Program, and therefore provide land for a family that was qualified to own a home. So I think that's something worth looking into, because our other option is, it's hard to tell who we're going to be able to get to help us build ADUs, and most of us want them. Like Anita said, for our families and loved ones, that's the only way we could guarantee that my son and my grandson could live in Seattle. So, and it's a problem trying to find construction workers and somebody other than the master builders. You got to be careful who you put in your backyard, who you allow in your yard. So there's just a lot going on with that ADU thing. I think it's great that we can have that option, because that's really the only thing that's going to save us. But there's a lot of other little twists and turns that I think need to be explored with that.
Yeah, you bet. And actually, again, in another slide here, we'll hear a little something about ADU with the new announcement that came out this week. So things are just moving at lightning speed.
Cool.
Ryan?
So just real briefly, I know that this is probably where the bucket that was around the sound transit, trying to be able to kind of take advantage of some of the increased value around some of that stuff would have gone. I'm guessing because it's not listed here, that means it doesn't look like it's going forward. Are there any kind of conversations around that? Or like, I know the intent was to try and come back after a year to kind of revisit that. And I was curious to know if that conversation had been going on, or if we've kind of just given up on that piece.
Yeah, if there's anyone who can lean in with other information, I think we're talking about the housing benefits district idea. It wasn't there in 24, yes, but it was in 23. A lot of conversations are always happening, but at this moment, I don't see something coming forward to my ear. But if someone has other news, please do share. I would say that's probably not going to be something really in that starter home production plan as a specificity that it's transit, but I'm sure that that is definitely going to be a part of how they're thinking about things. But yeah, I don't have any new information about the possibility of housing benefits districts coming back up.
Yeah, having worked on it, I don't think it's going to come up in that way, but I don't think TOD is dead. I think there's still conversations about how to handle any kind of development in transit-oriented zones.
Yep, and that'll be in our next slide up as well. Kathleen, I'll give you the last, last moments here in this
Great.
slide.
Thanks. I just wanted to say a little bit more about the Skyway Homeownership Green Space Project. This is a joint project between Homestead Community Land Trust and the Skyway Coalition, one of the community-led housing developments that we've committed ourselves to support. It is 57 homes, a mix of townhomes, stacked flats, as on 3 acres surrounded by 11 acres of green space, so tons of park space immediately surrounding the buildings so that there's lots of places for kids to play. And it's a project that answers this concern that people have about, are we giving up all of our green space to have affordable housing? Absolutely not. They can and should be developed together. And this is proposed for surplus property, a King County surplus property that is currently not managed at all and will benefit from wetlands restoration and salmon habitat restoration and a variety of other environmental benefits. So just wanted to say a little bit more about that and where it came from, and that it is likely to be the largest community land trust permanently affordable home, and very unique in its in the creation of homes inside a community green space, a very large community green space. Thanks.
Yeah, it's a super exciting project. And, as advocacy opportunities come up to make sure that it has what it needs to move forward, we'll be sure to stay connected. All right, we're going to move on to our next category here, which is zoning and regulatory reform. So our third area is focusing on supply and basically access to affordable homes by addressing zoning and regulatory reform. So we have comprehensive plan updates that are in process. The City of Seattle will be releasing their draft zoning maps in mid-October. And then we're going to discuss those further in November at our November 1 meeting, once we can kind of have a look at the maps and consider what we want to advocate for. We also know that the Seattle comp plan may or may not be that much a part of 2025. It depends on the timeline of the process, how quickly the city moves, how quickly the council moves. Theoretically, one would hope that by the end of this year that will wrap up, but it's very possible that it could be 2025. And so that's why I'm putting it back up here. And then, of course, other cities and counties are also in various stages of their comp plan. So we're going to continue to be flexible about inclusion of comp plans in the 2025 framework based on those developments. But again, we're in September. Things could change a lot between September and December. So we'll just keep going with that, but keeping this on our radar. The other bill is lot splitting. I do believe it is going forward for 2025. And the bill does authorize lot swap division by owners, providing the possibility of creating more affordable homes on smaller lots, and also giving existing homeowners the ability to stay in their community and build family wealth, maybe by leveraging a lot split. And we're going to hear more about the 2025 version of this bill and the effort in our October meeting. Transit-oriented development, as Peter was mentioning, I'm not sure. I know that this bill had a lot of cooks in the kitchen last year. And we do continue to lean in to ensure that affordable home ownership is a part of that future transit-oriented development ideas. And we're going to hear more about the developments around a 2025 bill in our November meeting, because there is a lot of movement around the idea right now, but it's not really clear where this bill is going to go. It's not clear if they're going to kind of take it where they had it and again, try to find the thing that works for everybody, or if they're going to say, we're in the middle of comprehensive plans and this bill wouldn't come into effect for 5 years, and maybe this isn't what we do, so we study something. It's not clear what way it's going to go, so we'll just keep you informed. And then this was the new bill I was talking about, Ms. Ruby. So City of Seattle this week, they announced on Monday that they are planning to introduce an ADU companion bill. And they are looking to expand the ADU sizes to 1,500 square feet to be able to get 2- and 3-bedroom family homes. They're looking at creating a fee simple ADU ownership structure to bypass HOA. And they are providing incentives for preserving the existing home while an ADU or a DADU is being developed. They're also considering some siting flexibility to maximize the possibility of how an ADU would fit on a lot. And again, the announcement for this companion bill just happened this Monday. No one has the language out, it's not released, but it was basically them talking about how they're going to implement the ADU bill from last session, and that they are considering bringing forward a companion bill. And so, we'll hopefully get to learn more in October and November, and reach out to them to see what we can learn. So how are you all feeling about these actions? What can you add about these items for the good of the group, or are there other actions that should be? And Kathleen, looks like you have your hand up.
Yeah, just want to sort of raise for everybody our own experience with trying to use the ADU streamlined things in Seattle. This is misrepresentation at the highest level, because we can do, the zoning is there, but these pre-approved plan sets you're supposed to be able to walk in one day and walk out with a pre-approved plan set, that is not at all reflective of reality. You may be able to get a plan set, but then the land use decision making is just as fraught and complicated as developing a full development. It's awful. It's like they are trying to make it difficult. And I can only imagine that the folks in the Central District that are trying to put ADUs and DADUs on their properties are experiencing the same barriers that Homestead is in trying to use the statute. So this may be a good thing. I don't know if the companion bill will address any of that, but I would just flag this as a parking lot issue, that there are significant barriers with permitting and land use on doing ADUs and DADUs, and I can only imagine that's having an impact on a lot of folks that in this space.
This is Mark. I just want to ditto or emphasize what Kathleen just said, because Parkview just did a DADU in Seattle, and we really had a lot of trouble. And we did choose the plans that they recommended or that were pre-approved.
It's pretty unbelievable. Oh, you know what? I see Miss Ruby's hand up. But I'll just say this, as someone who's been working on trying to build in my backyard for 4 years, it is extremely upsetting, frustrating, and unacceptable, to be honest with you, about how difficult it is to do exactly what the city says they want to do, which is prevent displacement. How extraordinarily difficult it is. And I retired an executive level strategic advisor from the city of Seattle. Now, if I can't figure it out at my level of government work, I am not sure who in the community can. And I've tried to create my own guidebooks and all kinds of other resources for folks to be able to follow this. It has been literally impossible for the community to follow this, and to actually access and build on their own property. It has been extraordinarily difficult. So I would love to be on whatever committee doing whatever work there is to do around this. I'm in. I also had posted earlier in the chat, does this group facilitate any direct political action or any kind of action directly with legislators, both at the local and state level, or county level? And then is there a place to deposit? There's a lot of great organizations that are working on not legislation, but policy actions that really should be, elevated and lifted up. A lot of times, I know Ann Campbell's here from Commerce. Commerce has done a great job of identifying by us organizations and creating a platform for those voices to be heard. It would be fantastic if the Black Home Initiative and all of the affiliated organizations could lift up those voices in a similar way. So if there's a hub or repository where we can put good policy work that's happening within these organizations that really does elevate the, by us voices, we should take a lead on that as a policy group, because my personal lived experience is oftentimes when I come to the meetings, there are very few of us that are actual homeowners, that are in the meetings, that are not in the space representing in our capacity solely as a homeowner. I get that there are many people on here that are passionate about the work and also are homeowners, but in terms of the folks that have been disproportionately affected by redlining for generations, as Ms. Ruby spoke earlier, I think it would be really important to elevate those voices in some of these spaces. And that work is getting done. They just don't have the right place to deposit it. So I hope that this place can be part of that.
Yeah, and I hope so as well. And again, our VHI Network Policy Digest is kind of the lifeblood of communication for the group. So when you have something that you think should be shared, then please send it my way so that we can, highlight and elevate those things. Ms. Ruby, you had a comment there. We'll just ask you to unmute. Almost. We still can't hear you. So just, there you go.
Seattle needs oversight to make sure they do the right thing. When Seattle's ADU law passed, I was down there. I fought against MHA, but I was down there fighting for ADU. And there were so many families that wanted to do the right thing. They wanted to, there were young adults wanting to make an ADU for their priced out retired parents. There were retired families, homeowners that had bought their homes for years. They wanted to create an ADU for their priced out kids. And, there was everybody with good intentions. Well, after 2 years after that, we started finding out that they weren't allowing Black homeowners in the CD in upzone neighborhoods to do any ADUs. They was putting barriers all over the place. And I knew that it was because they wanted us to sell our property. They wanted to encourage us to sell it so that, the master builders could buy it and build a townhouse to house these new rich people that they knew were coming to town. But I had no idea that it was all over Seattle, all ethnicities, pretty much everybody, like what we heard today, that tried to do an ADU just met with all kinds of resistance, complications, lies, from the Department of Permitting and Construction, just so much stuff that they really didn't want us to build ADUs. At that time, the only people that were successfully getting ADUs built were the Wall Street investors and people like that was coming in. Well, they had billions to work with, so they're going to be able to get ADUs, and they're the ones that first started building the 2 ADUs on one lot with the house, and they bundle it all up and make a HOA out of it and charge $1 million a piece for it. So then, now the master builders are in there. So then in 2023, May 8th to be exact, when Governor Inslee came to NAM in the central area and, signed a lot of bills, one of them which was the ADU bill. And I think he said that, these cities have to give up permits for ADUs. So that made me feel good. That made me feel like, well, finally we'll be able to get some permitting done. And some of the people that I've worked with in the CD, a couple of them have finally gotten their permits for, to do ADUs. But all this new stuff coming out, and especially this new policy that you just spoke about. I read the thing on Monday too, And I've already wondered about that because, you know, it's like Ross Perot used to say years ago, the devil's in the details. And until we really find out what that law is about, you know, with my trust with the city of Seattle at this point being an all-time low as far as them wanting to help us do things to keep us in our homes, and you know, my trust is very low, but I got an open mind and I'll wait and see. And I'm hoping that things work out to where everybody on this call that has talked about having problems getting permits, using the new blueprints that's supposed to be, you know, created to help us to make things easier, things being just as complicated as they've ever been. I'm hoping that everybody on this call will be able to get some relief because, you know, people want ADUs, but
Yeah, yeah, I agree. And definitely it's a subject that keeps going since we have new things happening in the moment. But we are running a bit out of time for this section. We do have a guest here to speak with us. So I'm going to go ahead and move us forward to our last bucket. And then I'm just going to remind us all, you know, we're all working together under this common shared priority to move forward. All the solutions don't exist at the same time. Everything is not perfect when it comes out the first time. And it's important for all of us to lean in and share our experiences so we can make things better. So, you know, having the ability to provide that feedback is very powerful. And, you know, we'll continue to be able to kind of hear that and echo it back out and see what changes we can make. So I'm just going to move on real quick because we are buttoned up against some time here. The last bucket that is in our homeownership policy framework is funding. And this one happens to have quite a few significant pieces on it. And again, some of these are going to be from previous and some of them are new. So these are 10 policy actions that we're looking at that are focusing on the resources we need to produce affordable homeownership. And rather than have me go through them, we're actually going to move on to Jesse to be our guest presenter, who's going to give us a look into the city, county, and state revenue landscapes, and then discuss these policy actions within that conversation. So again, we've got about 10 funding items here. They're all falling into different levels of government. And they are falling into scenarios of different budget landscape moments. And so we're going to look to Jesse to try and help inform that a little bit. And again, you know, welcome, please, Jesse Simpson. He is the HDC Director of Government Relations and Policy. We appreciate him joining us today and sharing his knowledge about the affordable housing revenue outlook for 2025. I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing my screen here. And then that way, Jesse, you can go ahead and choose to share yours.
Hey, everyone. We're doing well. I'm going to take us through a few pieces of the revenue landscape looking ahead to 2025, focus on homeownership. So first off, City of Seattle is set to release their budget. There's the mayor's recommended budget set to be released on the 24th of September. We have heard some amount of what to expect there. We know we are going into a difficult budget year with a pretty significant general fund deficit, well over $200 million. And the city of Seattle will be, we've heard the mayor will be looking to partially backfill that gap using the Jumpstart payroll expense tax, likely in line with how they've approached it in the past few years. Maybe I'm wrong and it exceeds expectations and they found some way to raise revenue or plug a bunch of gaps without tapping into that. But it seems clear that while some Jumpstart funds, given how much continues to raise above the original projections, will be dedicated to the Jumpstart spend plan, which goes into affordable housing and equitable development. Many of those also will be tapped for the general fund. More details to come. next week, we will be looking to mobilize as many folks as possible during each of the city council budget hearings to talk about the importance of those jumpstart funds for both affordable housing and corporate development. We know that there will be the 51 million through the Seattle Housing Levy for homeownership as part of the what's been passed last year as the 2023 Housing Levy. I think Equitable Development Initiative, similar, given that it is largely funded by Jumpstart, is a bit up in the air. And again, I think we need to be making a case for those funds being built on a year-by-year basis. Yeah, basically, we're moving into a accelerated timeline and intense phase of advocacy in the city budget cycle. The overall process is the mayor releases the proposed budget. They've been working on that for the past 3 or so months. And then city council has 2 months worth of hearings and work to dive into the budget and propose specific recommendations and pass the final budget for signature. One other piece Bambi put here is on the Pro Housing Grant, which is a grant that the city of Seattle has applied for from the federal government. Well, Bambi, do you want to actually speak to this a little bit?
Sure. I'm hoping we'll have City of Seattle come and speak with us in October or November. They were waiting for the funds to get done, and it's the federal government. Things move a little slower sometimes. But what they have on their one pager is that they're looking at home ownership. And so they're looking at a pilot program to convert at-risk rental properties to affordable home ownership opportunities. So the idea of kind of home ownership as preservation. And then they also are trying to support legacy homeowners to retain their homes by helping them navigate local regulations, provide support for building projects, and for those interested in developing their land for housing. So things like technical assistance, pre-development services, legal ownership transfer assistance, creating loan products, fostering community network opportunities. So again, we don't have as much information about this yet. We haven't had the opportunity to have City of Seattle come and talk to us about it. And I think they may also be wanting to be in a listening posture at the beginning to, check what they're thinking of doing. But just in terms of reviewing their one pager, it is a $5 million award. And those are the priorities that they have in the award.
Any questions from folks on city revenue landscape before we move into county and state? I think the headline is basically, we know a lot of advocacy is going to be needed to protect and expand investments in affordable housing, including homeownership in the budget round. We probably won't be starting from a zero baseline when it comes to Jumpstart, but that those funds will be tapped for the general fund deficit. And yeah, stay tuned on Bambi's email alerts. Hope to see a bunch of you in council chambers throughout the budget season. So to take everyone's voice to really make the case for homeownership, for equitable development in a inherent environment of scarcity. So any questions, or I can move on to King County. Okay. All right. King County is also facing a funding gap. The relevance for homeownership is lower because the amount of homeownership funding of the county is lower. So one way to look at it. The King County has had a equitable development initiative. There is a plan and there is no funding for it. We also know there is many of you have probably seen the announcement by Councilmember Many of you have likely seen the announcement by Councilmember Gumai Zahwa about the Regional Workforce Housing Initiative that had its first hearing. Proposal is to, well, first they have to study it, but the proposal in broad strokes is for the county to issue $1 billion worth of bonds to fund the development and acquisition of housing for both low and moderate income people, with the rents and net returns on that housing being used to pay back the bonds. Feedback in the hearing, again, calling Bambi here to summarize a little bit of it, but from what I understand, there's a lot of interest in the idea, as well as a lot of specific ideas on how to improve the proposal. A lot of interest in expanding how it could serve homeownership, as well as potentially lower AMIs, lower income people, and kind of twin concerns which pull in two different directions of wanting to use government resources to serve lower income people, but also a fear of putting the county's bond rating at risk through this process, and recognizing that they would ultimately need to collect the revenues in excess to be able to pay off the bonds without it just hitting the county's general fund. So I think the issue there's a lot more to discuss on it, but it is good to see kind of big scale thinking, and I think this dovetails with some of what Governor Inslee had proposed doing in terms of the state level $4 billion bond a couple of years ago. So,
yeah,
nice to
and
see needs some more work as an idea.
Yeah, so there was the first kind of hearing on it, and it was new, and the committee and people were just kind of hearing it for the first time. They were really excited about the innovation, the idea of, not having another tax, but actually using the credit of King County. There's more than $9 billion that we could extend if we were going to go to zero, right? And so $1 billion of the $9 billion felt like a good calculated risk. The idea being that it was a mixed earner housing where we're looking at workforce. So, some higher AMIs as well as the lower and moderate AMIs, trying to think about, the firefighter and the teacher and the people who cannot live in the city, who may not be qualifying under other programs, but how can we leverage their need along with the other needs and let them be complementary? So it's an interesting idea. It's somewhat similar to the idea of social housing in that it is a mixed earning kind of community. And during the hearing, Habitat came to the hearing. They were asking, like, this is a great idea, but this is all rental housing. Is there a possibility for home ownership? And all of the council members in the committee were very interested in it. They were just trying to kind of scratch their head and think, how does that work out financially? Because the idea that the rents were going to be paying back the interest and principal on the bonds, if you have home ownership, that's not really like a rent. So what do you do? So they were really looking for people to, provide some input to see how they could expand into home ownership if possible. And so definitely was an open invite from Councilmember Zahala's office for people to connect around the idea, but it was just kind of its first flash. And they're going to give a second hearing to it so they can hear a little bit more before they would move it on to the full council after hearing about it. So this is just a brand new thing that's happening and super exciting, kind of innovative thinking. And, if there's a way for homeownership to exist within that scenario, it would be really interesting for people to lean in and try and figure out how that could technically work itself out.
Any other questions around county? And then I'll move on to state, which is kind of the bulk of the presentation I've got. So at the state level, the budget situation also not looking great. the state has three separate budgets. So they have a capital budget, which funds new construction, new housing construction under the Housing Trust Fund is our big focus area on the capital budget. It's the operating budget, which funds services, ongoing services, especially homelessness services is one focus of us for is HDC. And then the transportation budget, which the operating and transportation budgets are in pretty bad shape right now, going into the next session, looking at something like a $3 billion deficit across capital and operating, and then going up to 10 if you include transportation, given the major cost overruns that we've seen in infrastructure spending. The operating budget is also seeing the document reporting fee revenue quite low. It's a reflection of the downturn in the real estate cycle, and that's hitting the essentially a hit for homelessness services. So there's a need to backfill these costs, which have also risen with inflationary wage increases. And that's basically the first priority of the Washington Low-Income Housing Alliance when it comes to the budget, along with the getting as big a housing trust fund allocation as possible. There's also some initiatives on the ballot. There is the Climate Commitment Act repeal, 2117, and capital gains tax repeal, 2109. If those were to pass, they would completely decimate the budget even further. So we as HDC are helping to lead on that Climate Commitment Act, no on 2117 initiative, and also looking to protect the capital gains tax. In terms of recommended budgets, so the Washington State's process, the Department of Commerce provides their recommendation on how big to go for each budget. The governor creates a recommended budget, sort of similar to the city of Seattle. This is Governor Inslee's last recommended budget, and then it will pass to it's up to the legislature to actually ultimately write and pass a budget. So it is a bit of an awkward budget year as well, with a recommended budget coming from Governor Inslee, and then whoever the new governor is, whether that's Bob Ferguson or not, will be the one actually presiding over the next legislative cycle. But in any case, it's in the new year, it's mostly up to the legislature, but the governor's budget provides sort of a conceptual starting place for looking at the budget. Commerce's Homeownership Division has recommended a full $1.2 billion for affordable housing across the biennium of 2 years that the budget is in place, including $240 million for homeownership. This is scaled off of what they think would be necessary to really completely close the gap in between what the housing need numbers show that we need to add in terms of affordable housing for low-income people over the next 20 years, and then what current resources are able to provide. This $1.2 billion number is likely higher than capital budget is actually able to accommodate. And so organizations like the Washington Low-Income Housing Alliance are pushing for a $500 million at least baseline expansion over existing housing trust fund, looking to grow the housing trust fund as much as possible within the constraints of the budget. but looking for at least 500 million, and also recognizing that the scale of the affordable housing shortage does call for investments in the scale of billions. And then beyond the budget itself, we are also moving forward a few different state level revenue bills. As I was mentioning, our priority for the Housing Trust Fund is getting to at least 500 million for the biennium, pushing that higher if we can. We're also looking to pass the Affordable Homes Act. This has been a top HDC priority for the past couple of years, and would create a permanent fund source for the Housing Trust Fund. Iterations in past years have had as the main fund source there the real estate excise tax, which is a tax on paid by sellers of high value real estate. This would increase it. Last year's would have increased it for those selling properties worth more than $5 million, and then dedicating the proceeds to a wide range of affordable housing, including permanent fund source for the Housing Trust Fund, as well as on the operations side. We are definitely looking to bring back a dedicated revenue bill again. Conversations are still in the works at the state level regarding exact structure and fund source for the bill. Yeah, still exploring that. There's also a covenant homeownership account budget proviso, building on the work last year. Bambi, if you want to speak about this a little.
Sure. So we're not clear about the amount that will be asked for in 2024, but just a reminder, I'm sorry, in 2025, but again, in 2024, we received 1 million for the buy-in for developer capacity building, and about 500,000 went to counseling and community outreach to get the word out about CHA. We're thinking of coming back in 2025 to again continue to invest in buying for developer capacity in the homeownership counseling services. But, those are very early conversations, so no amount to share. In terms of the wealth tax, HDC is taking a leadership role in a reboot of the wealth tax to some extent. We want to see it passed. We want to see it passed this year, and we need everyone to lean in to make that happen. This is one of the only sources of revenue that can actually meet the scale of the need that we have for change. And the bill has had housing, education, disability, and taxpayer justice buckets in it before. These might have some adjustments, but we're basically beginning to convene a strategy team right now, and we'll hear more in our October or November meeting as we move forward. But wealth tax is finding its way into the national discourse. It's finding its way into the conversations within our Washington state legislature as we continue to look for revenue sources. And even those that seem possible are really just plugging some holes as opposed to really throwing the kind of resources at the problems we have that you could do with something like a wealth tax. And then Washington Future Fund also coming back. That is the baby bonds program that can be used for buying a home or going to college or starting a business. They had a relaunch that we had talked about just a little bit ago. So we'll be also looking at that as we move into the 2025 revenue bills.
Any questions at the state level? I should also mention the state is exploring some other progressive revenue options that would fill the gap fill the budget deficit. But again, those are still private conversations, and we expect to know more within basically a month or so.
We're doing pretty great on time, like almost to the minute here, Jesse, and I appreciate that. And, it can feel a little bit like our September weather in terms of like there's some clouds up in the sky, but we're also getting a little bit of blue and a little bit of sun streaks. Budget processes are really complicated, but that doesn't mean that they can't be impacted. And it's about people using their voice to show their priorities. So we'll look to opportunities for that, and we'll be bringing them through again in the advocacy, the policy digest that comes out every week. It is budget season in City of Seattle and King County, and then we'll shift right into the legislative session. So, do think about leaning in. 2025 is a really unique year because it is a national election year, and so much is going on, and so many different topics are kind of floating up. We're excited to see homeownership in the discourse on the national level, and the wealth tax on the national level. And, Washington State has been known to be innovative. We like to be first and get things done. So we're hoping that you will all lean in on that. And then, I think there's just one question I want to add, or Anita, you had asked earlier on, you were kind of trying to understand, like, how does this group operate and influence? Black Home Initiative started this is our third year with our 5-year plan, and the policy group started in tandem to try and create those policy changes to make, the goal possible. We are increasing our influence every year when everyone leans in, talking to those they know, showing up for testimony, sending in their emails, making sure that, they're saying that this is what they want and that these policies are important. So, different people are meeting in many different ways through their own organization, but also coming into the room and being able to say, I'm part of HDC, but I'm also a Black Home Initiative partner, is a great way to be able to continue to leverage that input that we can provide and give us that ability to kind of walk in the room and be heard. Given the Covenant Homeownership Act passed, we have a lot more leverage in making appointments with leaders and having them tune in to what we're doing. So all of this does come together. It's messy like anything else. There's never going to be the perfect legislation to solve a problem ever. Always going to have to go back and forth and back and forth. It's always going to be important to center the voices of those who are most impacted by the legislation. And so again, these meetings and this effort is open to everyone who shares our priority to increase Black homeownership. BHI has the 7-point plan. And so this is just one part. This is one pedal. We are the policy side. But there are so many other people working in so many other ways because it's a big problem and it's to be addressed with many solutions. So definitely always reach out and let me know if there's something that I can elevate. So we have a few minutes here at the end of the meeting, and we use this time just kind of holding it for you all to have the opportunity to inform one another if there is an announcement you'd like to make, something that's good for the group to know about an opportunity coming up or something you're excited about. So feel free, if you have an announcement to make, to go ahead and do that now. I'm going to pass along a bit of an announcement that I heard at the beginning before everyone walked in the room. Oh, unless Nicholas, you're here. Good.
Yes. So my bad. So the Urban League will be putting together an advocacy day for legislative session, and we're trying to nail down the dates and times, and we'll be sending out a newsletter to people to try and see who's interested in being engaged. But yeah, I just wanted to put the feelers out there and let folks know we're really trying to plan something and really get something going, because I think the greatest thing that we could do is have boots on the ground and people at the Capitol to understand that this is their right to be able to talk to their representatives and bring up these different policy focus areas.
You bet. And Nicholas, please do reach out to me. And then as you get your details together, I can make sure that those get elevated. So
yes, thank you so much.
You bet. And Mary, did you want to share something?
Yes, I wanted to. So I work with SHAPE, the South Sound Housing Affordability Partners, which is kind of like SKIP, if you know about that. And we're recruiting for our advisory board. So if you live or work or have an interest in housing in Pierce County or know somebody who does, you should apply. And I can drop a link in the chat.
That's great. And Mary, if you want to send me an email, I can make sure to also get it into our digest.
I think I did send, I just sent that
I think
to you
you
today.
did. I
Okay,
saw
great.
it.
So
Yeah.
you have it. Okay, sounds good.
That's great. Anyone else have some last thoughts or, something if they'd like to announce for the good of the group? Again, in the digest every week, I am trying to make sure that I'm highlighting things that I'm hearing about. I know that the Walk the Block event will be happening, not this weekend, but the following. So I hope to see many of you there. And that will have 2 days this year. There'll be the wonderful event all Saturday within the community. And then on Friday, there is actually an institute. And it'll be an interesting scenario. They'll have 4 homeowners in the Central District who are trying to think through what they can do with the property they have and how they would like to stay living there. And they're going to have a design charrette where they think through those together with others. So an interesting way to start thinking about these solutions. We're talking about the ADUs and the DADUs and talking about these new pieces of legislation we're hearing. In the end, it's always going to be about trying to make sure someone can take a step they want to take for what's going to work for them for their life. So yeah. Well, if we don't have any other announcements coming, hot off the presses here, I can give you a few more minutes back in your day. Thank you all for being here today and continuing to work through the framework. Again, it's a living document. This is a co-creating group. And so please do use your voice. Please do reach out. Have a great afternoon, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Bambi.
You bet.